Hello there, and welcome to the Jarrett Hill Show. I am Jarrett Hill, and I'm very excited about the conversation we're going to be having with you all today. I'm excited about the folks that we're going to have as part of this conversation even more because I've been having conversations with friends and coworkers and people all over the different places about this particular topic. We're talking about what's up with straight men. I think that's a very broad way to put that, but ultimately, I want to have a conversation around some discussions I've been hearing primarily from Black women about the ways in which they're engaging with Black men, specifically straight men. But there's also even a queer twist to this that we're going to jump into a little bit later in the conversation. But this began most recently because, again, this is a conversation I've heard many times, but this conversation started really recently. Again, for me, because of a post that I saw on social media. It was an interesting conversation around the ways that men engage women and that women are engaging with men. And it comes from a woman named Ciera Francois, who I want to bring into the conversation in just a moment. She wrote this post that really kind of struck a chord with a lot of different folks. And I want to bring her in now. Ciera, Ciera's having some sound issues, so our apologies. Ciera, can you hear us okay? I think you're having some audio issues with us, so we're gonna pull you back out and see if we can get you to be able to hear what we're saying as far as your audio is concerned. But the discussion that Ciera was beginning with us here is really around the ways that men perform for other men, but don't necessarily seem to have the interest in women that they say that they do, or that is kind of performed or is a part of the conversation that is often about men engaging with women, women engaging with men, and the ways in which that attraction or that interest does not necessarily show up in the ways that we would like it to. I want to take a look at the first tweet here from Ciera to kind of give us a sense of what she was saying. The tweet says, a noticeable subset of men are heterosexual in behavior, but male-centered in orientation. You really do not like and are not attracted to women. Y'all like vagina. Everything you do with women is for the sole purpose of being able to fuck. It says also here, it goes further. It says, if it wasn't for that, you'd be with a man. Your desire flows toward women physically, but your admiration, emotional investment, and sense of validation are directed toward other men. There is an absence of genuine interest in women as full human beings. The tweets go on further, and it's a really interesting dynamic that we're discussing here in this conversation. I want to pull up some of our experts while we're figuring out the audio with Ciera. But Shar Jossell is joining me. Shar is a friend of mine that has been around just about every different platform that I've been a part of. Shar has been on as well. Shar, as you hear that first tweet, I want to know, like, what are the top line thoughts that you're having as you're hearing this discussion?
I mean, I stand in agreement. It's something that I've talked about amongst friends and on podcasts that I've been on in the past, particularly as it pertains to dating and just trying to establish any sort of formidable emotional connection. And I know that every attraction and the spectrum of sexuality, I'm not here to trivialize or sensationalize it, but I know that it's all so incredibly nuanced, or it can be incredibly nuanced. It's not always, it can be. And with that, I think these conversations really serve as a seesaw because you don't know where you're going to land when you're talking or trying to get to know someone, actively dating someone and trying to get to know them. You don't know where, they're going to land. And it makes me think about like the conversations that have come up around Meg the Stallion and Klay Thompson and their recent breakup, and how it's dredged up a lot of conversation around like that's how you do the temperature check. If you're out on a date and trying to get to know someone, you ask them what they think about Meg the Stallion or ask them what they think about Beyonce, and that'll tell you everything you need to know because it oftentimes opens up a can of worms. And so, the conversation is centralized. It can get a little all over the place. But I mean, I agree. I read those tweets and I'm like, I'm not one to protest that. Like, it is what it is, at least in my lived experience. I totally agree.
Are you finding that when you're talking with men that the attraction or the appeal that you're hearing Ciera talk about in her piece, how are you seeing men showing up with like with an affinity for other men, but like an attraction to you that might be more sexualized than it is intellectual or curiosity or that kind of thing? How do you see that show up?
I see that show up all the time, and I venture to say it's getting worse. In the name of red pill theology and toxic masculinity and just the current landscape, social landscape we're dealing with right now, it's not showing signs of improving or getting better. And I know that again, these things can be incredibly siloed and they can be incredibly specified to the lived experience. But like for example, I brought up on another podcast I did um just conversations I've had with men who are both locals or natives to Los Angeles and transplants, um, where it's kind of been like they don't date the women that they actually like. It really is one of those socioeconomic markers. It is a grasp for some sort of social privilege. And I've seen that play out. I mean, you could ask any black woman in South LA, in Southern California, not even South LA, but Southern California, who is attracted to black men, what her track record is like. And I'm sure that there would be um, responses that wouldn't surprise anyone that lives in LA. And again, this is particularly for black women who like and date black men. It can get a little weird. And I do think that it is dependent on where you live. I do think that, because those have not been my experiences, like when I've been in Texas or Chicago or visited New York or New Orleans or what have you. So it when I go to Miami, right, it's Miami's not too far off from LA. And I feel like I might be rambling, but it is one of those things that I've seen it show up, at least in my view. I've seen it show up more so in men than in women, because women will date who they want to date for the most part. Like, women will date a booger wolf and her friends will just have to deal with it, right? Women will date in the name of a Tyler Perry. Women will date the well-to-do plumber or bus driver or whatever in Diary of a Mad Black Woman, the Shamar Moore character. Women are more prone and apt to date that trope or that type of a man, and men typically are not, unless it's all
So
about control. But we got to deal with the
yeah,
isms, colorism, texturism, featureism. Like it gets sticky. But go ahead, Jarrett, because
no,
I've
I hear
talked too
you, and
much.
I want to bring in ksera dyette and Amber Abundance in just a moment as well. I think we've also got Ciera who wrote this post. I want to look at the second post that she wrote here. She says, "You respect men, look up to men, compete for the approval of men, build your identities in relation to men's standards, and get women to show off to men." When it comes to women, the engagement is merely functional. Women are access points to sex, status, and or optics rather than people you are deeply curious about and want to build with. It's giving you're homo romantic and heterosexual. Ciera Francois joins us to be part of the conversation. Ciera, I want to know, how did this begin? Because I know this just wasn't like the first time you ever had this thought and you just kind of put it out there. Talk to me about the origin of this tweet before we get into the feedback to it.
It's very interesting because I actually just came across a completely different post of mine. And I was in the comments of something, and it was dated for January of 2025. I think at this point, so it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't a new thought of mine. I think that at this point, all of this came surrounding the new headlines of Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson breaking up, and just watching the overall feedback and discourse surrounding the topic. I didn't really think of it to be, um, I don't want to say like it wasn't really, when I made the post, it really wasn't supposed to be such a big deal. I didn't know that it was going to gain as much traction as it did, but the turnout, it really went crazy. In the my threads insights say that 1.3 million people had seen the post. And I'm not a popular person, I'm not a content creator, anything. This is just regular conversation. And so to see it gain that much traction and have so many people come across it and interact with it, it was quite fascinating for me. But just seeing, I want to say like how men responded. The majority of, I want to say, algorithm is Black people, so that is primarily the demographic that I want to say that I look at and engage with. But the comments on that post came from young and old, white and Black. There's somebody commenting on there in a language that's not English, like it's symbols. So people, clearly people across the world have something to say about it. And it was really just interesting. I think I told Danielle the most of the comments, they were all agreeing. The majority of the people agreed. I really did, I want to say, my best to put my eyes on almost every single comment. And I think there's like, I don't know, 10 to 15,000 or something like that, just to see what the feedback is. And the majority of the people agreed, men and women alike, actually. Both agreed that they can see it, even if it's not within themselves, that they can see. Men were saying that they can see it in their friends, they can see it, in their own relationships, even. There were
I
gay people who also said, it was like, oh yeah, this is absolutely true. I just never really came up with the words for it. There were lots of women who said that you've put words to things that I've been thinking and feeling all the time. So it seems to be a
I
pretty popular
appreciate
opinion.
I appreciate that because I part of what was interesting to me about having this panel, and I want to bring in Dr. Ksera Dyette right now, and also I'm going to bring in Amber Abundance. We've got a full panel of perspectives here. Um, I I thought this was interesting. You bring up gay people in the commentary that you've been kind of hearing from folks, and before I jump into like my own stuff, uh, Ksera, I've seen your head nodding. I've seen you kind of like having your own response off camera. Dr. Ksera Dyette is a psychologist that joins us. Talk to me about how you're thinking about this conversation before we even jump into more questions.
Yeah, it's hard because I have two perspectives. I have my professional perspective, but I also have my perspective as a Black queer woman reading this post. And I think what jumped out to me, at least like from a professional perspective, was thinking about this like from the attachment lens, like what was the focus, at least for me, with Ciera's post was this issue of male homosociality, right? And how we think about what it means to be legitimate as a man, air quotes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
how men police each other and how masculine hegemony and all of these different things really act as a way to say this is what legitimate attachment between men look like. And obviously it's different if we're talking about different societies, different cultures, but like the core idea of how we think about masculinity and how we think about relationships to women is pretty much universal across the patriarchy. And I've certainly had that in like personal dating experiences as well. And so those were like the things that I was particularly focused on.
I want to touch on, you used the word homosociality, and then Amber, I'm going to come to you after that. Talk about homosociality because I feel like people hear that and they're like, "Oh, now what did she say now? Now what was that?" Like, talk to me about about unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So it's really a term that was, started in like around, I think, 1976 and was kind of fleshed
Mhm.
out by Sedgwick, that really talks about like what are legitimate ways for men to relate to each other. And I know that male is on the binary, but that's the way it's talked about to explicitly say, okay, this is what we mean when we say that men can have physical contact with each other through sports. That's the only way they could touch each other. Or this is the only place that they could talk is over drinks, or they have these inside jokes about women with each other. So it's all these very sort of quote unquote male centric ideas about relating with each other that then robs them of the opportunity for what we would consider to be more deeper connection. And I have a lot of negative feelings about male loneliness epidemic as terminology because it displaces the responsibility of sort of a male dominated system for why men feel isolated.
Mm.
However, what it does speak to is that they are feeling isolated and they're sort of externalizing the blame for that isolation on women, saying, well, we're dropping out of the dating pool, or we're only wanting to date each other, or all of these other things, right? We're getting blamed for why they feel lonely. And so if we talk about it on the binary, again, I know this is binary language, but this concept of female homosociality is coming up where we're like, yeah, no, we're centering ourselves and we don't need you. And there's been a really negative reaction to that as well. And like I said, a lot of binary language that I don't particularly subscribe to, but this is the way the terms are talked about.
Amber, I see a whole lot of what's coming up for you first? I'll let you just jump in.
Listen, I know
we're having a little trouble hearing you, by the way. I want to know, I think we're having a microphone issue. But as you're switching it over, I want to just note, like, when I was speaking with Amber about coming on to this conversation, Amber was saying to me that there was a lot of ways that we could be thinking about the ways in which even queer men factor into the dynamic of this kind of homosociality, as I can say words. But like, I'm intrigued by that dynamic. Amber, let me bring you back into the conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can
Go
you
ahead.
hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I know that whenever I talk about this, people will think I am joking, and I am very much serious. But whenever these conversations come up in culture, specifically from Black women, I see it as like we're on the train to Black women who believe they are straight, expanding what that looks like for them. And it is time, sisters. It's beyond time. And just hearing the conversation today, I think what we lose when straight Black women, in their frustration with straight Black men, basically are referring to them as gay, it also limits the conversation we can have about how patriarchy is also showing up in gay men, right? Mm-hmm. That being gay is not now some like scapegoat to this is why you don't treat women well, when everybody is treating women poorly, right? Unless they have decided to divest from patriarchy and really wild ways of presenting in masculinity. But speaking to some of the points earlier, which Shar said, Black women will date, well, I think you said women in general, will date anyone, any booga wooga, to quote her specifically. I think there's also something to be said that they will accept. They also aren't expanding what they're attracted to in the different ways that masculinity can show up in people beyond cis men. And that is a touchy subject because people, there's a lot of information in the world. Well, people believe that you are born gay. And when we get into lesbian identity, sapphic identity, a lot of women also choose to date women because of their experiences within a patriarchal society, that it then we're so deeply socialized that we don't actually get to come into the world believing that we were born one way or another when it comes to our sexuality. Because I believe that, or the case that it was for me is, as a Black, dark-skinned woman who grew up in the church, I was kind of erased from having a sexuality to begin with. I had to go on a whole journey around my sexual attraction, even to men, because I was put in a position to really only see God as the center of my world. And with that came my queering, right? When I went on that journey to figure out, okay, what kind of sexual being do I want to be? I realized that was absolutely not limited to cis men, thank God. And I think that this is the case.
You know what? I said thank God in my own spirit. I was like, amen.
Blessings. I am blessed that I have been redeemed from heterosexuality so that I might experience a fuller love in this world. And I know people don't want to hear that because of, we really downplay lesbians. We don't have enough representation around Black lesbian and sapphic culture. But am I allowed? I'm not allowed. I'm going to try not to cuss on your show. But
say all the shit. Say the fucking words, girl.
These niggas are not your. These niggas are not your only option. They simply are not. And if you really want to shake your life up, it will involve not only decentering men, decentering family, decentering who people expect you to be in this world, and decentering other women's perceptions around who you can be. Because a lot of these conversations around how black men should or should not be performing is also attached to black women reducing themselves down to just being vagina, just being sex, so
Yep.
that they can't open themselves up to what they actually want in this world. Because a lot of black women also aren't dating who they are attracted to. So,
Oh, okay.
y'all,
So let me. Can I
you're
pause you
not
right here?
helpless. You're not completely helpless if you really want to embark on that self-actualization journey. And that's it.
So Amber, it sounds like you're telling Ciera that she needs to try women, but I'm not gonna make Ciera. I'm not gonna push Ciera in that direction.
Who said Ciera
No,
hasn't?
no. Oh, now that's the tea. Ciera said, "Now, what do you know about what's going on over here?" Ciera, as you hear
Do
this
a follow-up
conversation, though,
But but so
go ahead.
I'm going to preface, I made this from, I want to say, a sociological standpoint. This really was not about my own personal
Sure.
situation.
Yeah.
I could, you know what I mean? I could talk about my personal life and that would just be a whole nother, layer to all of the things. But when I really did say it, it really is from an analytical lens. I am a speech language pathologist by profession. And so I'm always assessing situations. I'm looking at things from a clinical lens. I feel like in my mind, even if I'm not trying to, and I gather information, it's like really an analytical thing for me, like just seeing what's happening in the world. And so just gathering all this information, even like I'm telling you about for the comments on the post, for me, it's literally like data research to see all of the different things. So I know Amber just mentioned saying like the women should do it. One of my rebuttals to a lot of the men was saying, oh, it applies the same way to women, or you could say that women are doing the same thing. My response was, I don't feel like women would just date men for the purposes of sex, because there are plenty of studies that show that women aren't even orgasming
Yeah.
from
Say
sex
that.
with men, and it's not even enjoyable. So it could never even be the reverse from, again, from like a statistical kind of standpoint. So that's just what I guess like what my thought process is on it. Just not even personally. That's just what is out there across the board. But it is interesting that you just said women aren't also dating someone that they're not always dating people they're attracted to. And that kind of gagged me. I don't really know that I necessarily would say that like, are we dating men? Like where does the attraction lie, and what is it, what would it need to be in order for us to say, okay, am I not attracted to him, or what is it that I'm getting from this man? Like you said, even if I'm not attracted to him. So what did you say? Called it a self-actualization journey. I think that that part could apply to both sexes.
I
Shar,
think
I
I
see you having an
yeah,
opinion. Go ahead.
because I tend to think that women, and this is based on again my own experiences and that of some of my girlfriends. I think that women tend to, especially in crippling patriarchy, we find ourselves splitting hairs to justify our attractions, because oftentimes if a woman is with a man, you love him, and you make excuses for a lot of behaviors and a lot of shortcomings, but it's also a status symbol for a woman to have a fat rock on her hand, right? It's also a status symbol of a woman if we're in, especially as we are speed running towards like Christo-fascism, to have that provider moniker on the person that you, or the man that you choose to attach yourself to. So I think that I find women, and like I said, even I've been in the position of splitting hairs when confronted, sometimes splitting hairs to justify an attraction beyond maybe like what initially caught my eye. It's like, yeah, he got this going on, but because I mean, to the sex conversation earlier, I think also within religious systems and within patriarchy, a lot of women are socialized for sex to be a service. you're not socialized to explore what your passions and your pleasures might look like. It is to, fulfill your whether that be your godly needs as the vessel to reproduce, or godly duty rather, or you're there to serve him, to make sure he gets to the finish line. And men also show up in this way because there's really no investment in women being satisfied in the bedroom. Hardly any investment in women being truly satisfied in the bedroom. It's all centered around men and what you can do, and yet again, another service you can provide. And so I think that when we zoom out and have this conversation, we can't leave misogyny and patriarchy, and then especially in today's day and age where we're seeing aggressive regression with rights being lost and policies being rolled back. Women are going to be finding ways to justify attraction to whatever partner they link to for survival purposes, I think.
But can I
Go ahead,
I'm
Amber.
sorry. Even on the survival purposes front, Black women aren't surviving these relationships.
That is true.
So I think in all of that, I think we're at a point where, in terms of the dating, not even going into the fact that we are seeing a rise in conversation about femicide, right? Black women have always been more likely to be murdered by their romantic partners. And I think as we are in a fascist society, they really have to, you're already splitting hairs on attraction to someone who might take you out of this world. And I think we have to get to a point with, specifically, I speak directly to Black women, because I'm like, at what point do you actually believe in love that you choose something better than this for yourself? Even if it means creating new communities and societies for yourself, especially because it is getting dangerous. It's not enough. These men aren't making money, they're being laid off too, right? So you're literally putting yourself in a harmful, potentially dangerous situation. On top of that, you're not coming. Like,
Listen.
you know what I mean? On top of that, say you get sick, you're with a man who won't even heat you up a hot pocket. Like, and I think we have to get, I love Black women down, but we have really babied Black women in this conversation as if they cannot choose, as if they do not have the ability to choose better for themselves. And
I want to say, go ahead.
like, these men are not, you can say no to them. Like, you can literally say no to them. And I find so many straight Black women suffering through these dating experiences because they won't unearth what is it about this that is allowing you to not focus on yourself and your development, in order to have these men, even in the context of a society where having a man actually is getting you not even half the things y'all Meemaw had. So at what point are y'all going to take accountability for your actions and choose differently and have different conversations about how you are dating, who you are willing to date, and who are you willing to spend your time with as you're sacrificing time with yourself?
I just wanted to say, speak from, again, just the comments. One of the thing, a lot of the things that I saw, there were a good amount of women who just kept saying, I hate that I'm straight, because I would much rather prefer to just go ahead and be with a woman. It's unfortunate who I'm actually attracted to, because it probably would be easier. So
You
I'm just,
believe
that's
that?
just to speak to the point. I mean, you can't make somebody be attracted to what they're not attracted to. So while I understand what you're saying, I also, from the heterosexual side, I guess, can say that doesn't mean that you're not still willing to. That doesn't mean that you are willing to necessarily just go explore something else just because it's not working here. So just as much as you're speaking to Black women, I'm also going to speak to Black in general, I am still looking for a man. I'm not willing to date outside of my race. And I
Mm.
also
So
speak, I
But
speak
it was
to this
also
now.
brought in that you're not complete. Like, are we talk? You mentioned not being heterosexual though.
Okay. And so now if we take it to a personal perspective, I would say that I am bisexual and not biromantic.
okay.
Like
So
hetero
okay, just
flexible,
I'm
as
just
the
Hetero, that's
Gen
what I
Z
was gonna
say.
say. Heteroflexible.
so if
Okay,
you
so I'm
are
not
hetero,
privy to all the terms, but that might be it. I just I
we're
don't think
making
that.
terms
So
I
up
to
at
be
this
clear,
point.
Ciera,
yeah.
I think well, Amber, I want to note that we're hearing you on a different microphone. I think we might need you to switch over to the other microphone that you have. But Amber, I'm excuse me with when we're thinking about this, Ciera, as far as like heteroflexible, I'm pretty sure heteroflexible is a word that an app came up with to be able to
Yeah,
like
it's
kind of
just
play
one
with
of
the lines
those
a little bit
little,
here.
yeah.
Exactly, exactly one of those apps. But I am kind of intrigued by this because I'm always thinking about this when I'm hearing Black women talk about being single and like. For a while, I would watch like Sherry Shepherd a lot, and like she would always be talking about looking for a man, and like I feel like it's a common conversation when we hear from various different like Black women who are media personalities about the single experience, and I always think to myself about seeing a study years and years ago that there were 2 million more Black women than there were Black men just off of GP, right? Whether or not
Mhm.
you are talking about them being the same, whether or not they are the same orientation as far as heterosexuality or not, or being age appropriate or being available or the orientations, all those different things, that there's a 2 million person gap. And so I'm thinking about this also from my perspective as a queer person, as I'm traveling abroad, and like I'm used to dating Black men, right? Like throughout my life I have dated mostly Black men. I've had one white boyfriend, and child, that's a whole chapter in a book about a whole different thing, right? But like I've always been wanting the Black women that I know that are exclusively dating Black men. I'm like, when I've traveled abroad, the Black American dynamic that we have feels so different when you're dealing with Black folks that are from around the world as opposed to this American dynamic that we're talking about. So I relate to you on the I like to date Black men because I feel that way, and I'm used to dating Black men. I feel like there's a cultural alliance kind of thing, that a cultural familiarity that I'm used to with dating Black. But I also recognize that when I'm abroad or if I'm in another context, I can start to look at it a little bit differently and be like, oh, I'm really into Black American men. And that's a very
Mm.
limiting
Yeah.
kind of context when I'm thinking about how I can move throughout the world. Shar, I see a lot of head nods.
No, I want to give Amber a chance to respond to the earlier
Yeah.
point.
Amber, are
Okay.
we able to hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Go for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
now I have the ambulance is
I'm like,
coming.
we got silence now, girl.
We gonna make it do what it needs to
They're
do, girl.
they're trying to shut me up. They're silencing me. Okay. So I just want to note that for what we were talking about, when I said, do you believe that in terms of Black women saying, oh, I wish I was straight? Literally in this conversation, I want to make it very clear. I'm dealing with the information only that you've offered up.
Mhm.
I am not, whenever I talk about queerness with other Black women, I don't see me acknowledging your queerness as a bad thing, right? I'm someone
Mhm.
who came out later in life. I came out closer to my 30s. And by coming out, I mean I told my mother, right? And then it was able to live my life in peace after that. Not much, but I'm having orgasms so peacefully. Um, and I mention this because, again, I do not believe as many Black women are like, woe is us. They're not straight, though. So I think what we're often dealing with is people who have to unsocialize themselves to believe that the only way they can experience happiness, access to survival, their basic human needs like survival or buying a house and having a family, that can only happen with a man. And I think that is the conversation we're not having, and instead we're scapegoating to Black men and then referring to them as gay because we're not dealing with our own queerness. And that is where a lot of the conversation falls apart for me. Not falls apart, but it's an interesting perspective that if you think they're gay, then what are you guys? And what aren't we talking about? What
Mm.
conversations are we not talking about in terms of our own sexual attraction and desires, and why not? Because it's not that you don't find pleasure with women, it's not that you aren't flexible, it's not that some of y'all haven't even come across a cute little trans man that you're attracted to. You are also dealing with the same socialization that you're accusing black men of dealing with, and you're not dealing with it either. So until I think it's a fruitful, robust conversation that I'm excited to have once we get past the men, it's the men who are evil and they're gay, and then it's decentering men, and then we can have conversations about compulsory heterosexuality so that more black women not only get free but get the lives that they want and deserve, even if it doesn't look like what you were told it was going to look like. That's just
I
my
want
offering there.
Can I add something here?
Go for it.
Because, like, so I think all of this matters, and there's the accountability piece, right? But I feel like what's missing from this conversation also is discussions about privilege and the ways in which privilege gives you access to language and room to think. Because I can say for sure, in my own journey as a queer Black person, I'm also an immigrant, which gets you back to the sort of the culture travel piece, Jarrett. But like, until I had access to the language to think about and think through these things, I wouldn't have been able to express it in the same way and arrive where I've been, both in my personal life, but also professionally and how I work with people. And so I just think about some of the people that you mentioned on your post, Ciera, who were like, I didn't even know how to think, like, I didn't hear this before. Like, you know, all of those, like, I think accountability is a part of the conversation, but I also think like where some of this conversation is operating from the perspective that everybody's coming to the table with the same access to language about how to think about themselves and their identity, and how do we sort of expand that access so people could do that thinking about that you're talking
Right.
about, Amber. So that's just like a part of it.
And I think
So
a big part of expanding
Well,
that is for black women to tell the truth about their desires. We're not going to get there if we don't talk about it, or if we say that you all can't handle the conversation, because we're at a point now in the culture where we obviously can. There's millions of people who looked at that post. What's the follow-up conversation to that? And we have that in what Jarrett is offering us, but we also need that to come directly from black women who are kind of operating within this cultural dissemblance, to throw more language in there, which is how black women have operated throughout history, which is that we hide our internal lives, hide how we're actually surviving, hide how we're actually experiencing pleasure in order to keep access to perceived privilege and safety. But what we are finding right now is we are not safe. We actually don't have the privileges that we thought we had. So now let's open up the conversation and talk about how we're actually functioning. What those end of the night Friday nights look like with the homegirls. What does the AKA trip actually give? What happened at Spelman College? You know, those are things we're not discussing because we're afraid to until we hear someone else discuss it. And I think that is a big push that I am trying to make for black sapphic women, is to be like, yeah, I was I thought I was straight. I'm not. Here's what I can talk about now instead of just complaining about the men.
And I definitely want
Shar.
to, yeah, I just want to, of course, I hate the term hold space, but I have to hold space for your point. But to the doctor's point, my wheels were turning about how everybody's arriving to this conversation with different lived experiences and coming from different places. Because I also think so much of this conversation, a huge chunk of it, goes into deconstructing and divesting from whether that be systems or certain organized Abrahamic religions that people have just been bathed and baptized in, no pun intended, from birth. Like literally it is an indoctrination. And so I think that deconstruction and that divestment from some of these systems and some of these tried and true things that we have been socialized to believe are the truth, the way, and the light. And until people start interrogating that on a personal level, which is also incredibly uncomfortable, I know particularly for a lot of Black Americans, because religion and Black Americanness goes hand in hand. Until that happens, I don't even think we can get to the part 2 of this conversation, which is what I'm framing as like what Amber just proposed. Until people can begin peeling back the layers of that onion about how we've been indoctrinated and how we've been socialized collectively. Because to Jarrett's point, the church is part of Black culture, Black American culture. Religion is part of the fabric that makes up Black American culture. So how do we get to a place to where we can have the Amber abundance conversation if we don't first address one of the biggest and most pervasive elephants in the room?
So I think
Ciera?
that just in getting back to, I absolutely hear everything that Amber was saying. And I think that Shar just mentioned it to say that that would be a whole different second step. When I made the post, it wasn't want to take accountability away from women, but the conversation for me was more so about the fact that, like you said, if women are in these relationships, and even outside of women being in the relationships, because like I said, this is, if it's coming off the heels of the situation with Megan Thee Stallion and Klay Thompson, and me just looking at the discussion surrounding that, these are Black men who weren't even in a relationship with her, couldn't get next to her on their best day. We're talking about the fact that the way in which men may discuss women, the way in which men respect. So it's just like it's the respect, it's the and not even just black women, because the white men were saying the same thing. It's kind of just like, I wish you were more like the bros, or I wish I could talk to you about this, or I wish I could, you were more like that. And if that's what you feel, then why don't you just go do this? So I think that Amber did say something else, and I want to say, a lot of the men, it was like, you're just telling me to go be gay. I don't have a problem with anybody who's gay. That's not what the issue is. It's the fact that if I'm telling you to go be gay and you receive it in a negative light, that's what's on you. I'm just saying, if you prefer this already, there's only one more part that you're missing. And so I say that you just like vagina. Somebody else said they just like holes and haven't tried that one. And so, like, what is it that we're really talking
Say
about as far
that.
as, like, you know what I mean, when it comes to
Yeah.
exploring? It's like, you've done every other piece, you got everything else as far as attraction is concerned. If you're
Say
already doing it, the only thing that you're doing is you're creating this whole life just so that you can be next to this person for this literal one thing. The whole time you could just opt to the other one. Like,
Yeah.
But to your point, oh, sorry, Jarrett, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say to the earlier point about like how we can't really dictate, I guess, what people are attracted to. I think when Amber was saying that Black women need to explore, I think the same can be said about Black men. If their homeboy checks off all the boxes except for that one piece, they're not going to move forward with it. And I also think in this current day and age, when we are drowning in red pill, Andrew Tate, Kevin Samuels, like we are bad. Like Twitter looks like the dark web. What I imagine 4chan once looked like 10 years ago, that is now front page news. All this looks maxing and all of these terminologies and foids and whatever they're saying. It's now mainstream pop culture type language that like I shouldn't even know what that means. Like that stuff existed in the darkest corners of the web, and now it's part of the lexicon. And I think as we get deeper into these conversations, and with men in particular not being held accountable, because again, they're not socialized to really even see women as people, right? Like they're not. So I was watching Devil Wears Prada 2, and Anne Hathaway's character was on a date and was like, I don't even think any guy I've ever dated has even read any of my work. Like even just watching her date be actually interested in how her day went and what she does for work, that the bar is on the floor. And so I think it goes hand in hand with the ways in which men are socialized to view women, to interact with women, or anything feminine for that matter, anything that's deemed feminine culturally. I don't see, I guess I don't see an endpoint in this when the red pill, I'll call it red pill theology, is everywhere. You can watch a workout video, they're sliding it in there. It's in the pulpit, right? Like these, and it's getting even more rigid as this country slides further and further and further back, where it's like the middle school boys are red pilled. And I'm watching, to Ciera's point, I've seen comments under threads where women are like, I had to divorce my husband. Like it led to divorce because he started going to the church of Andrew Tate and bringing that shit into the house. Like so it's breaking up relationships, marriages. Like it's really bad out here. And I think that that's worth mentioning, that we're dealing with. This conversation might have looked a little bit different a few years ago. I'd even venture, if we were having this in the pandemic, having this conversation in the pandemic, we'd be having a different conversation. We're in a different landscape right now.
I see her. I see you. I want to come to you in just a moment. One of the things that I feel like I've been dealing with is like my own attachments to like our constructions of gender, and like trying to deconstruct that a bit. I was watching Kevin Hart's Funny AF on Netflix. They had a live finale, and I was watching one of the comics who was talking about his experience in life or whatever. His name is Usama Siddiqui, and he was particularly he had a thread through his whole stand-up, his whole 10 minutes or 5 minutes, that he was like, oh, this is gay and that's gay. And he was like, oh, you know, when men wake up in the morning, it's like the gayest part of your day. It's just,
oh brother.
Right. And like he did a whole bit around that, right? And he was like, oh, and that yawn is gay. And I was like, you know, the audience is laughing and it's a funny bit. And like he goes through, and there's other different moments in his bit where he's talking about this is gay and this is man. And I'm like, it's so interesting to me that all of the things that are identified as being like overtly gay or too something for straight men are just like normal human functions, right? Like waking up and stretching is gay. Like, what do we mean by that? And like, he's doing stand-up, it's a bit, right? But I also like want to acknowledge the way that we think about what is quote gay versus what is quote not, right? Like the things that oftentimes we see men talking about that they wouldn't do, or I wouldn't say that, or I wouldn't sit next to him, or I wouldn't go to that place, or I wouldn't wear that color, or I wouldn't put on this piece of jewelry, or I wouldn't blah, 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 because that's gay. And it's like, or they often won't say that the thing is gay, right? I think comics will sometimes come out and be that direct about it and say like, oh, this thing is gay, right? But I think that oftentimes we'll say, oh, I wouldn't wear that, or I wouldn't hang out with him, or I wouldn't go to that place, or I wouldn't do that thing. I wouldn't put that on. I wouldn't eat that way. I wouldn't eat a hot dog at all, or whatever, you know, those different things. And I'm like, it's so bizarre to me, the things that we think of as being queer coded. But then also I see women perpetuating that. Right. I see men do it with each other. And then I see women saying, I wouldn't want no man who had ever done anything like such and such. And it's like,
Molly,
what are we talking about? Yeah, go ahead, Shar. All right, Ciera, you wanted to jump in a little bit earlier.
I just wanted to add, again, just from the comments, the things that I had learned, a lot of the people were asking, you know, well, where do we think that this comes from? And so I think that the top like 4 things that I had mentioned, and then I put them in order, I guess, of what I feel like historically how it started. The first one they were talking about from the Greek and Roman times, where homosexuality amongst men and women, it was like presented on the forefront, you know, that they were very open with their bodies. There are statues, you know what I mean, with full genitalia showing, and it wasn't necessarily unheard of. And it wasn't until Catholicism came on the rise, and Christianity came on the rise, where now it shunned and condemned homosexuality. And so that could have been the start of the closet. So were you just mentioning things that were that were normal, where how men interacted? Now, once Christianity has started, now there is this whole, oh my gosh, we're not allowed to do this anymore. And that was like the first pushback of freeness, if you will.
Yeah.
And then you move into the next point, was they were talking about in the patriarchy. Well, is any different realistically how women were thought of and treated. Women were tools and a resource. They weren't ever meant to be in relationship. That's not what that wasn't the objective of the woman. The man wasn't necessarily trying to be in a relationship. They were there to procreate with. You didn't have any opinions. That's why we didn't have any rights. We didn't have any access to things to build on our own. So the patriarchy was never designed for men to have an interest and consider women, and that just grew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All these generations of men who didn't see it that way. And then the final one, this one really took me over the top. They were talking about porn and
Oh
how
yeah.
I asked, I'm like, well, somebody mentioned porn. I'm like, well, I was like, elaborate. And she says, it was like, you can't watch porn and say that you're watching it for the woman, and you can't extract the penis from the situation. And so if you are watching porn and you think that you're getting aroused from the woman, there's a possibility that subconsciously you're also gaining arousal from the man, and you're not taking that part into consideration because you think that that's not what you're doing. Because if you didn't watch porn, the only thing that you would see is your own self. But now that you are exposing your mind to this and consuming this, now you're taking in something else, and you could possibly be affected by that as well. And I'm not necessarily saying not affected, but you know what I mean? Like that could be playing influence into what it is that you are actually attracted to. And again, like I said, these aren't my
It's
own
a
thoughts. These are just
spectrum.
things. Yeah, these are just the things that people were dropping in the
Well,
comments that I found to
It's
be
a
very
spectrum.
interesting.
it is a spectrum. And Ciera, you don't know me as well as the other guests here, but like double clicking on this church sexuality piece, like that's very in my wheelhouse here, especially over the last couple of years with the work that I've been doing. But like I find interesting when we think about how the church is factored into this. I always say like one of the greatest experts of Christianity right now, or especially of the church, is like heterosexual marriage, right? Like if you are in a Black church, particularly, has my experience, but churches in general, like the major export, the most important thing that we can create or produce is marriage, right? And if you're not married, you're waiting to get married. If you're not waiting to get married, it's because you already are married and you're hopefully in a great marriage. And if you're not, well, you can't get a divorce because God hates that. And you can't be having too much sex, but the sex is the only place that you can have the sex is in the marriage. And if the marriage is not giving you the sex that you want, then girl, you're kind of out of luck. You know what I mean? And like the dynamic of the way that we talk about sex and sexuality is so bizarre to me within the church context, because I also think about the ways that we tell men the way that they need to show up is to provide and to lead and to be like a rock, right? But then we also tell women that is what they should want in a man, right? Is a man who leads and provides and protects and whatever the other things are. But like the way that we position femininity and masculinity, and like masculinity, oh, he provides, he protects, he does these different things. Oh, and femininity is being nurturing and caring and loving. It's like, can a man not be nurturing and caring and loving? Like I think we love those dads, right? I think we love those stories, right? And we the things that we identify as masculine are things that are just should be part of the things that we identify as human are things. I promise I talk for a living. The things that we identify as feminine are just human things, right? Just purely humanity. But then when we think about the ways that we identify what is masculine, it is always some kind of like performative shit that is just really frustrating to me. Masculinity is definitely a prison. Go ahead, Shar.
A self-imposed prison, I'd add, because men are the only ones that have the power to break the patriarchy, and they won't. They are clinging fiercely onto the patriarchy. They're quadrupling down on the patriarchy. So it's a never-ending cycle that's worsening as far as like what the rules are. I remember when I was on Twitter, there was this guy, as a running joke, he kept a list in his phone about the things that men couldn't do that would be considered gay. And it was because of women on Twitter, like, is it zesty for a man to eat a banana? And then he'd open up the list, and I'm talking about, it's like 300 posts of like the rules from both men and women that are considered gay. And we know that, especially within the confines of the church, being gay is the worst thing that a person can be. And to your point about sexuality, even in church with married couples, you're supposed to be having sex to procreate. And that bleeds into the conversation around women's pleasure. You can't even bring that. You can't talk about that because it's supposed to serve one purpose. You're not supposed to get pleasure from it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that back up because, again, from my divinity school time, like one of the things that really was helpful for me to like finally break in the question that I had been asking. I didn't realize I went to divinity school still unsure if God loved me because I was gay. I thought that I was past that. But then I got there and I was like, oh, but I still have these questions about like how I show up in the world and whether or not God loves me and blah, 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 blah. And I was able to talk with various different professors and get different answers that really freed me from that piece of it. But one of them that was interesting, you all talked about, I think, Ciera, you were saying how women were not even seen as like valuable. Women are here for procreation. Women are here for pleasure. Women are here as property, right? I was reading a document from the 70s written by a scholar named Walter Wink, and it's called Biblical Perspectives on Homosexuality. And on the very first page of that, they talk about the ways that the Bible discusses homosexuality. And it says like there are all of these different references, and many of them are references that we identify now as gay, but in the actual context of what was being written at the time, it was about sexual violence, right? Where warriors from one tribe would come in and like rape and attack the men and sodomize them and those different kinds of things, right? It wasn't actually talking about a man loving another man and having that kind of consensual love, sexual kind of connection. But then it also talked about some of the other instances where they didn't have enough information to be able to make a useful assessment of how we construct sin, because sin is constructed. But it was talking about how at the time they believed that men's semen contained all of the things necessary for the reproduction of life, and that women's bodies were incubators for that. Not understanding the fallopian tubes and the ovaries and the egg and how all of those things come together, and like a woman has a contribution to that as well, right? With an egg and the incubation and all of those different things. And so they thought that the semen was contained all of the things necessary for life, and so the idea of spilling that seed was then a crime, right, to a tribe that is trying to grow and populate a nation. The idea that you don't even understand the way that women work, the way that women's bodies contribute to this process, don't appreciate the way that a woman's life matters in that situation, it really spoke to the way that there was no appreciation for women. Women were property. Women were things that we shoot into to be able to have a kid and tell what to do, right? And like that was another piece of it that was like, if you look in the scriptures that talk about homosexuality, it never mentions men. Right. It never mentions women. It says men who lie with men. Right. It doesn't say women who lie with women. It doesn't say women who have same-sex attraction. It only talks about men because of the way that semen was viewed in that time. And like women and lesbianism is not really even factored into any of the way that scripture is structured. So that whole conversation has been a really interesting dynamic for me. Shar, I'll let you jump in. I'll let everybody get a last word because I told you it'd only be an hour.
Yeah, I'm like really, really quickly because I know we went real churchy for a minute, but I do want to recommend a documentary that I had to screen a few years ago. It's called like 1943 or something like that, and it talks about how. Have you seen it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so yeah, they have
a podcast as well.
It's these 4 theologians that went to Yale University in the library on the 2nd floor, and they changed the word, whatever word was in that scripture, they changed it to homosexuality when originally it was discussing pedophilia. And then when they saw that things got off the rails, they tried to retract like a decade later. But by then, for political reasons, they were like, we're not reissuing or reprinting Bibles because it was already working. My second point is to women and just the socialization. And I always want to link back to the reason why we're here with this thread, with women even getting rights in the 70s and being able to open accounts. That wasn't really rooted in my view, and based on what I've seen and read, wasn't really rooted in like women's rights and men finally being like, okay, it was rooted in capitalism. They needed more bodies in the workforce. So that is the only reason why women got those rights. But with that, the socialization then had to change, but it didn't. And so that's why we're here where we are today with talking about providers and this and that, because of course, back then we all know the stories of our grandmothers and great aunts. And like, we know what life was like pre-1970 for women, particularly, and especially Black women. And so when a woman gets a credit card and look at the progress we've made today, where we can say with our whole chest, I don't need you. You need to come correct and have your shit together because I don't need you. Black women are outpacing in education, are outpacing or were before Trump came in and laid off 600,000 Black women from the workforce, but we're just excelling. And so Black women were not, it wasn't time for all that riffraff because we had our own and we still have our own, but we had our own and we had made such formidable strides in just such a short amount of time, because we were given the access. And so that's part of the aggressive rollback as well, because men, a lot of it just, for me, it pulled back the curtain as to why a lot of marriages existed to begin with. And it was because you needed me. It wasn't because you loved me. It wasn't because grandma loved grandpa. It was just oh, no, she needed him. And
well,
that's
quite literally.
Quite literally. And it's showing that men need women more than women need men. And what I mean when I say that is based on socialization. I have dated men, I will embarrassingly admit, I have dated men that don't know how to wash, don't know how to separate the colors from the whites. I've dated men that don't know how to properly load a dishwasher because that was their sister's job. That wasn't their job. That's what their sister was socialized to do. So it's all folded in one. It all leads back to the tweet, the thread, the reason why we're here, but it's all so layered. Those are my final words. Thank you.
Well, Shar, thank you for that. I want to note to people who are looking for the documentary you're talking about, it's called 1946. There's a podcast that discusses it as well, called 1946, the culture shift tour. It's so interesting the ways in which they kind of highlight how homosexuality entered the Bible in the 40s, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. Shar, Jossell, as we let you go, and I'm going to give final words to everyone else, so get ready, everybody. But Shar, tell people where they can connect with your work. Shar,
wait, do you want me to leave after I say my stuff?
I'm gonna you can hang out. You'll be okay.
Okay. Hi everyone. My name is Shar Jossell. You can find me everywhere at Shar Says So. Okay, that's SAYS Says So, and that's all my socials and stuff. And so come holler at me there. Thanks for having me, Jarrett.
Absolutely, I appreciate you being here, Shar. Ciera, talk to us. Give us your final word. What's your last thought here as we've been kind of wrapping this up? How are you feeling about the conversation that your tweets have your threads have kind of started here?
It's good to talk about. I think it's good for the discussion. I'm sorry, please forgive me. The doctor's name, what she said about yes, about having the language. I think that if nothing else, I am proud to have given that to some people, to be able to say, okay, this is how we're going to say it. And again, there's been, even now, people have referenced me on other people's tweets like, oh, this is what Ciera has coined. And I said I couldn't possibly take the credit for this, because I did learn of Marilyn Fry and Eve Sedgwick and James Baldwin, all being great literary people in academia who've done the research and spoken about these things before, but putting it out there and it getting the visibility on a large scale. So now that these conversations can open up more, and really, like Amber said, is this self-actualization journey, even if whether it be men or women, to really take the time and figure out, like, so what is it that we're doing here? What is the objective? What do we need? If it is going to be that men need women or women need men, we have all this science now. Anything's possible, quite literally. And so just being able to make those kinds of choices, I'm glad that the conversation is here. And Jared, I thank you for having me. Everyone, my name is Ciera Francois. I am Ciera French with 2 H's on Instagram and Threads. Follow me really on Threads to see what other crazy things I come up with and be a part of the conversation.
Sarah, I really appreciate you jumping in and having this conversation with us. You've definitely started some interesting discussion. Dr. Ksera Dyette, final thoughts here and where people can connect with the work that you're doing.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So I'm going to leave the biggest bomb that we cannot unpack. But I think what jumped out to me about this is like male attention is such a huge currency. And I think it's important that we figure out how to decenter that and support each other. And Black women in particular are not the best at supporting each other. And we're really good at policing each other. And especially as things are closing in and we're having less access to knowledge, like we really need to be communicating with each other to continue to make sure that we have access to this language to unpack things. And I'm Dr. Ksera Dyette. You can find me primarily on TikTok at the Anti-Ableist Doc, also at Instagram. And you can also find me on Facebook as well. So the Anti-Ableist Doc. Thank you. Thanks, Jarrett, for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here. Amber, final thoughts here as we wrap up. What's the last thing on your mind as we're winding down this conversation?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. My final thoughts are free yourselves. Please free yourselves. Yes, patriarchy has its alleged benefits. Male attention does have currency to it, but it's turning up as wooden nickels for Black women. And based off of everything that Shar said as well, in terms of what Black women have been able to do for themselves, I am looking forward to us knowing that we can do that for ourselves in terms of the type of love and relationships we can have as well. In Niecy Nash's name, I pray again and again. That's what I have for y'all.
You know what? I appreciate Niecy Nash becoming like the patron saint of the converted.
Portia
Like,
in
let
there,
me tell
too.
you. What's that?
Well, Portia gotta go a little further than the season first.
Very
And
that.
Amber, you forgot the Bets. It's in Niecy Nash Bet's name. You pray.
You are correct. Let me put some respect on our good sis.
That Bet's piece is very important for sure. Yeah, Amber, tell people where they can connect with your work.
You see, y'all be thinking I'm playing and I'm not. So make sure you follow me at
The gag is we know you're not playing, and that's why we love it. That's why we live.
You can make sure you follow me on at Amber Abundance on Instagram, TikTok. In addition to these analysis, I also really have spread my wings to wreak havoc in the comedy world, doing stand up to make
Look out
space
now.
for myself. So please follow Toxic. Why y'all got me laughing? Follow Toxic Femininity. We have a live show every month in LA. It's a blast. It is in the tune
It is.
of this. Okay. And you know the ladies is cute there. Okay. Everybody cute. They them.
Listen,
It's the
Gay
lesbian
men, you can
advocacy for
You
me.
can find at all times.
Sierra pointed it out. It's definitely the lesbian advocacy, but also like the lesbian recruitment. It's a whole thing going on. So I appreciate it. I am so happy with this conversation. I feel like y'all brought exactly what I was looking for. And I hope that for each of you that has gotten to tune into this conversation, that you've gotten something useful out of it. I'm actually really intrigued to have this conversation about queer people and the ways that we engage in love and relationship. So that's something that we'll probably be doing coming up here soon. I'm so grateful to my producers, Danielle DeCourcy and Jessica Williams-Bell, for helping out with putting this episode together. I hope you're having a great one. We'll see you on the next episode of The Jarrett Hill Show. You can find out more information at Jarrett Hill on all the social media. You can go to jarretthill.com for more information on all of the different things. You can get my book, Historically Black Phrases, and wherever you get books, and historicallyblackphrases.com for more information on that. Last thing, if you are in the Boston area, join us on June 18th. We will be at WBUR City Space for Historically Black Phrases Live, the Black Culture Game Show. You're not going to want to miss that. So please join us and go to historicallyblackphrases.com/live for more information on that. I'm Jarrett Hill. I'm grateful for your time and your attention. Have a great one. We'll see you next time.